Atlanta Press Club Debates 2008, the Democratic race for the 13th Congressional District, is brought to you from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Here's the moderator for today's debate.
Hello, I'm Helen Neal, the noon news anchor at WGCL-TV. Welcome to our 2008 election campaign debates originating from the studios of GPB. Today's debate is organized by the Atlanta Press Club. Now, let's meet the Democratic candidates facing each other in Georgia's 13th Congressional District primary election. They are in alphabetical order. Donzella James, who was elected to the state Senate in the 35th District in 1993 and went on to serve 4 terms. Ms. James is the co-founder and chairperson of the Task Force for Good Government and the nonprofit Keep South Fulton Beautiful. And David Scott, he was a Georgia senator for 19 years before he was elected to Congress in 2002. Mr. Scott sits on many committees, including the Financial Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. Here is the format for tonight's debate. In the first round, each candidate will answer 2 questions from our 3 panelists. And then in the second round, the candidates will ask each other questions, 2 questions apiece. Each candidate will have time for rebuttal in this round. And then in the third round, the panelists will continue questioning the candidates. Finally, each candidate will get 30 seconds to make a closing statement. But before we get started, let's meet our 3 panelists selected by the Atlanta Press Club. First, we have David Zelski, co-anchor of GPB's Lawmakers series. Next is John Hollis, a reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And our third panelist is Tom Baxter, who is the editor of Southern Political Report. Now let's get started with the debate. In the first round, each candidate will be asked 2 questions by our panelists. The candidates have 60 seconds to answer each question. By random selection, Donzella James gets the first question from David Zelski.
With gas prices rising at the alarming rate they are, people talk about drilling off the coast, taking some more restrictions off, and in the Alaskan Wildlife Preserve. Where do you stand when it comes to opening up these new areas for drilling, and how much do we really know is out there?
Well, it's a lot out there that we do need to explore. And I am an environmentalist, but I believe that technology has improved to the point where we can do some drilling. But we have to put some policies in place to make sure that we do everything to protect the wildlife and to protect our environment. So I am for if certain provisions are put in place, I am for drilling.
John Hollis now has a question for David Scott.
Congressman Scott, thank you for participating. You've taken some past criticism for the use of campaign contributions to pay family members, but you've maintained all along that you've done nothing wrong. Can you please explain this whole thing to us, and why did you stop the practice?
Absolutely. We went directly to the Federal Elections Commission, and we got their guidance. And they said that family members can be used in a campaign as long as it's for market value. And that is exactly what we have done. And we followed the Federal Elections Commission straight down the line, and we've had no complaints, no issues from the Federal Elections Commission on that.
Tom Baxter, now your time to ask Donzella James a question.
Ms. James, the lines around the 13th District aren't as squiggly as they were when it was first created shortly before you got to the Georgia legislature. But this district still sprawls over a huge portion of the South metro area. Does one side of the district really have much in common with the other, and would you support reconsolidation of the district after the 2010 census?
Well, of course, after the 2010 census, most lines usually do change because of the population growth throughout the whole state of Georgia. But I like it the way it is. I see it as the smiling face, and the 13th district is the grin on the end of it. So, yes, they have things in common throughout all 6 counties, starting with Cobb, Douglas, over into Fulton, and then, of course, Clayton and Henry, and then tipping off the other side of the grin with Cobb. So, yes, I think that it's a solid, good district. It's the district where I live. I'm the only candidate who lives in the 13th district, and I'm very proud of that district. I worked hard to build it and to make sure that we put things in place when I was in the state Senate. Thank you.
And David Zelski gets the final question for David Scott.
Your website talks about high-quality health care for everyone, but I didn't see too much about exactly what you're going to be doing. Does this mean you're looking more towards a government-based health care system?
No, I think we have to look at coming up with a universal form of health care. That's going to take some time. It's going to have to bring a number of parties together. But meanwhile, there are things that we can do for specific areas that we know we can do. For example, children's health care. And I was the congressperson that saved Peach Care, as it's called here. Because as you recall, you covered the legislature. You remember last year there was a shortfall that ended in March, and we had to go get some money. Well, we were able to do that. We were able to, and I provided the amendment to be able to get that done, and we were able to save Peach Care and health care. In addition to that, I also have a health fair every year in which we bring all of our constituents and give them an opportunity so that they can have exams from just about every area. There are a lot of things we can do individually. Universal health care is going to take a universal approach, and we're going to have to gather around the table to do it. But when you get around the country and you see what other countries are doing, we can certainly provide health care for everyone.
Thank you. That concludes round one. It is now time for our candidates to ask each other 2 questions. So you get 15 seconds for the question, and then you get 60 seconds to respond, and then 30 seconds for the rebuttal. So by random selection again, David Scott asks the first question.
Okay. Mrs. James, may I ask you, what would your plans for bringing down gas prices?
Well, there are many things that I feel that we must do. One is to look at alternative fuel, and as the chairperson of Keep South Fulton Beautiful, we already work with looking at waste to energy and making sure that we use the oil drippings, the cooking drippings. We're collecting that, and we send it to Biofuel Alliance, and they're making racetrack fuel. And it's even being used right here in the state of Georgia, in Hampton, Georgia. So that's one of the things that we can do. And then we need to conserve gasoline, too, in every way that we can. So I would like to promote conservation of our gasoline and carpooling and many other things that we can do with our automobiles. We need to make sure that the car manufacturers start making the gasoline miles per gallon increase, maybe even double.
Thank you. David Scott, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, I think that we've got to move away from dependency on oil. The high gas prices are due to supply and demand. We must bring the demand down, which means we must go to alternative energies such as ethanol. And we've got to do some good public policy things. For example, we've got to revisit what they're doing in Brazil. They make ethanol from sugarcane. It doesn't make sense for us to have a 54-cent tariff on every gallon of ethanol made from sugarcane coming from Brazil. That's one of the things we can do. But we've got to get away from our dependency and demand for oil. That will bring it down.
Donzella James, you may now ask David Scott your first question.
Yes. Mr. Scott, you were in 2003, you voted with George Bush's Republicans to prevent affordable prescription drugs, which was H.R. 2427. In 2005, you voted with Bush against Pell Grant's teacher financial incentives and aid to minority institutions, H.R. 609. Okay. So why should the people expect you to support Obama when is such a big difference between your vote and his, now that you have also changed again over now to Obama?
Okay. I think the first part of our question was on that, but let me just straighten the record out. On one of those, you are correct. On the other, I never voted against Pell Grants, very supportive of education. We were very, very much active in moving in that direction. There may have been a procedural vote, but it had nothing to do with the actual vote. My record on education speaks. As a matter of fact, I opted the amendment to put the Pell Grants in place. Now on the other point about the support of President Bush on the Medicare and the prescription drugs, that bill involved an awful lot. I was not and did not support that phase of the bill, but As you know, Georgia was going through a crisis then for Medicaid. I was able to get $200 million added to the Medicare prescription drug benefit to be able to go into Georgia schools, into the state of Georgia. And it saved the Georgia legislature from going into a special session. Oftentimes, you have to, if you're working on something, you get a rider and you get attached to it, so you have to vote for it for that reason.
Thank you. And you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Mr. Scott, you did vote on H.R. 609, and that was in 2005, and it did, it was on Bush's particular package against Pell Grants and teacher financial incentives, as well as aid to minority institutions. So you did vote on that. So you please check your record. Please know what you're voting on when you vote on it.
Well, we certainly will, but that might have been a technical matter. I don't recall
sorry.
that. I think my record is
You
very
can,
square.
You can ask a question coming up.
Sure.
But by random selection, you actually get 2 questions in a row here. So your second question now.
My second question, Mr. Scott, is that you were outspoken supporter of George Bush's rush to war in Iraq, and you even on one of the local radio stations said that that anyone who didn't support the war was unpatriotic. But we have a war on drugs.
Can you get to the question?
Yes.
It's just 15 seconds for the question.
We have a war on drugs right now that's filling our prisons because we have not attacked it, and we have so many of our juveniles on drugs.
Question, please.
And
I'm sorry. Just can you get to the question? You can give him a rebuttal after he answers.
Okay. I would like to know what you plan to do in the state of Georgia for drugs, and I want to go and take a drug test, and I think all of the elected officials should do it. Will you take a drug test as well?
Okay. Pick either of those questions.
Let me start with the one that's most important. It's very important because I think the war in Iraq is extraordinarily important. And first of all, I never voted to go to war in Iraq, primarily because I wasn't there for that vote. I came into Congress after the decision was made to go to Iraq. Subsequent to that, I went over to see for myself very early on what was going on, and I immediately came back and it wrote some very, very serious questions. The press carried those as well. But I think it's very important to note that once the decision is made to send our troops into harm's way, it is very important. I am very proud to say that I would never abandon our troops. Once that decision is made for them to go into harm's way, this congressman is going to support for the troops and to make sure they are well taken care of. I led the fight for the Kevlar vest, for example. I led the fight to be able to make sure the underbelly of the Humvees were there. My important decision in voting on that issue for the war was to get our troops, make sure they're protected. But there's nobody in Congress working as hard to make sure we get out of there as I am.
You get 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
You can say that you're working hard to get our troops home, but you just voted to fund the war for another $162 billion just last month, and you continue to say you're bringing them home, but you're doing things to keep them there. So also, you didn't answer my question. I am going to go and take a drug test, because if you have to take a drug test for employment as a prerequisite for employment with Home Depot and other companies, even McDonald's, then I think that all the candidates should also take one. Will you go with me to take one?
Thank you. David Scott, 15 seconds.
No, I will not go with you to take the drug test.
15 seconds for your question.
That is not what I do. But let me go back to the point of the other deal in which she was talking about, and that was this, about the...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you going to a question?
Yeah, what she was talking about as far as the bill, the war. She asked several questions, but I think this is very important. Yes, I did vote with great pride because of the fact there were 3 pieces of legislation attached to that.
I'm sorry.
The
I'm
GI
sorry. Under
bill,
the format of this debate, you have to ask a question.
Unemployment compensation.
I'm sorry. I know she kind of went on. I know she went on too, but you need to ask a question. Would you like to ask a question?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, that will conclude this round of questioning. The third round, we return to our panel of journalists who will ask questions of the candidate of his choice. Candidates will be allowed 1 minute to respond, and as moderator, I'll determine if the opposing candidate will be given 30 seconds for rebuttal. So we begin this round with a question from John Hollis down there from the AJC.
Mr. Scott, Clayton County is in danger of becoming the nation's first school system in almost 40 years to lose its accreditation. What can you do to help prevent this from happening, even though local government is in charge of local education?
I think what we're doing is getting ready for once this election is over. The most significant measure will have taken place, and that is a new board will be elected. As you know, we've talked on the phone, did some interviews together. I immediately, when we got wind of this, got in touch with our Secretary of Education in Washington, D.C., to alert her of the situation so that we could be ready at a moment's notice to be able to provide whatever assistance we need. But the primary thing that needs to be done is, as you know, the first order of business is get a functional board in place, and that will be done. Now we've got a quick window between July 15th and September to meet the others. But from what I understand, I believe that once that is done, we will be able to make sure that the Clayton County schools do not lose their accreditation.
Quickly, as a follow-up, if I might, could you ever envision a scenario in which the state or federal government would place the Clayton County school system into some sort of receivership and take control of that school system?
Absolutely not. I don't see that. I think that would be a mistake. I think it would be tantamount to failure. We're not going to let that happen. Clayton County is an extraordinary county with some wonderful people in it, and they certainly do not deserve that. I do not see that happening. I think we're going to get a board in. And not only that, you have people all around this state and this nation who are just eager, waiting, ready to make sure that we provide every bit of help we can once we get the new board.
Next question comes from Tom Baxter.
Can
You can.
Expound on that?
Sure.
The Clayton County school system needs an extension possibly in order to make sure they meet the demands of SACS for their accreditation. The school system, many of the teachers went to our congressman and asked him to get involved, and he said it wasn't in his jurisdiction. But whether it's in your jurisdiction or not to immediately work on that, if you're the congressperson, then you should stand up and speak out on an issue that's going to affect adversely the children and the entire county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Baxter
I
gets...
did get involved. That's what I was trying to say.
Congressman, last month on a very close vote, you sided with the administration on the passage of the legislation amending the Federal Intelligence Surveillance Act, which, among other things, gives retroactive immunity to telephone companies which cooperated in warrantless wiretapping. Why did you break with the majority of your party on that issue?
Well, I think that there was a sizable number of Democrats who voted for that. Tom, I'm a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I am also the vice chairman of our subcommittee on terrorism, nuclear proliferation, and international trade. I'm also a voting member of NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So I have a purview of what the needs are and going on. I did not want to leave this country naked without any means of being able to detect and be able to get intelligence. As you know, we worked a good compromise. We were able to make sure that no citizen of the United States' rights would be trampled on in that area. We also made sure that this FISA court would be the only way that this could happen. It was not a perfect bill. It is not a bill I agreed on everything with, but at the end of the day, I felt it would be the height of irresponsibility as far as national security is concerned not to have some means in place to be able, if we need to have been able to find if there's a terrorist that's being contacted.
Thank you. Donzella James, if you'd like to...
Yeah, I cannot understand why anyone could say that that bill would not violate the privacy rights of individuals. It is not the first time that he's voted on bills that would take away the rights of individual citizens, even provisions that were in the Patriot Act, and also he voted for to eliminate habeas corpus in 2006, which was S 3930. He voted with Bush on so many issues that take away our rights. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you.
David Zelski gets a turn at a question now.
Ms. James, a few weeks ago, you, I guess, attacked Congressman Scott's integrity a little bit by saying he was name-calling Republican candidate Deborah Honeycutt. I'm not going to say the word here, but what is the basis of that claim?
Well, I talked to the person who wrote the article that said that he called our other female opponent that's a Republican the B word. And my statement was that I was not surprised, even though I was appalled. But I wasn't surprised because I had an opportunity to work with him for nearly a decade in the legislature, and he had said things that were less than gentlemanly in my presence and in the presence of other women in the past. And so I did feel that he definitely said that, and he disrespects women, in my opinion, because he's called me a name a time or two, and I just let it go because I'm bigger than that, and I just, I know him. So I understood that he disrespects other women.
David Scott, you're welcome to respond.
Absolutely not. Never called the young lady any name whatsoever. This is something totally out of the blue to me. That is far against my nature. Many of you know me. I've been in public office for 34 years, since 1974. I treat ladies with respect. I'm married to one and I have 2 daughters. Absolutely. This is a complete lie. It's a complete fabrication. It was just an attempt to get some attention. I know nothing about it, never said it, absolutely without any question. I would never say such a thing.
Final question in this round comes from John Hollis.
Yeah, Congressman Scott, the House Committee on Foreign Affairs in which you sit recently delayed a proposed U.S.-Russia civilian nuclear cooperation agreement because of citing concerns over Iran. What were those concerns, and what did those concerns have to do with Russia?
Well, there are several. Number one, there's a civil defense missile systems that want to be set up in Europe. The Russians do not want this because it's right close in their neighborhood. European countries are a little bit afraid of Iran and getting nuclear weapons. And so that's what we have. But it's very important to know that the United States has made sure time and time again that these are clearly defensive missile systems that are being set up. They are not offensive or aggressive in any nature. But still, I think that quite honestly, as we move and deal with Russia and Iran, we've got to be able to use that issue as leverage on a table to be able to get some distance between Russia and Iran. I didn't get a chance to get into the energy issue, but I'd like to here just very quickly, because of the fact that Iran and Russia combined control 46% of the known world's natural gas reserves. That is a very, very dangerous situation. So I think we can use that to pull some leverage away from them. Yes.
And you've got a moment for rebuttal if you'd like it.
I believe in launching aggressive diplomatic efforts to reach stability in Iraq and the Middle East, and to have all the countries to come together if they can in that area, in that whole region. And my congressman has not been voting to support that, even though he is on the Foreign Affairs Committee. So it's distressful to hear that his vote again did not comply with that of the wishes of our community.
Thank you. We have no more time for questions, but each of the Democratic candidates for the 13th Congressional District will now have 30 seconds for a closing statement. Donzella James was randomly selected to make the first statement.
Thank you very much for inviting us here today. I'm Donzella James. I'm a former state senator. I am a native Atlantan. I've worked hard in this community my entire life. I live in the 13th District. I'm the only candidate that lives in the 13th District, that pays taxes in the 13th District, and who has worked to improve the quality of life in our 13th District. I want to see us continue to improve. I want to see the children in Clayton County be able to get their accreditation back, so that when they earn an A, average, then they will be able to go to college and they will succeed in the future.
I know.
Thank you very much.
It's hard to squeeze it all in 30 seconds. And David's got 30 seconds for yours.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the people of Georgia, and certainly the 13th Congressional District, for allowing me to be the representatives for 6 years now. We have some challenges we're faced with in energy. We have some challenges we're faced with in foreign affairs. I'm uniquely positioned, particularly in terms of my seniority and leadership in the Congress, on the Financial Services Committee, in which we're dealing with the housing crisis and the mortgage situation, as well as on foreign affairs. And I am on the Mideast subcommittee, as I mentioned, the terrorism subcommittee, and on agriculture, which is the future for our energy, because that's got to come from what we grow.
Thank you.
Global climate is in front of us. We have some issues out there. I'm the best candidate, and certainly my congressional record has proven that.
Thank you.
I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's very hard to squeeze that in. And that does conclude our debate. We'd like to remind voters that the primary elections will be held on Tuesday, July the 15th. Our thanks to the candidates tonight and to our panel of journalists. We would also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging tonight's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club, you can go to atlantapressclub.org. The debates that air on Georgia Public Broadcasting will be archived on the Press Club's website, so you can see them there. I'm Helen Neal, and we thank you for joining us for this primary election debate.
This program was funded in part by a grant from the late Tom